44 minutes after the hour on the Michael Medved Show, Congressman Steve Scalise proudly serves his colleagues as the House Majority Whip. And previously he was chairman of the Republican Study Committee, which is the conservative House caucus. He represents the 1st Congressional District of Louisiana. Congressman Scalise, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, Michael, great to be with you.
Well, I wanted to have you on in particular because I thought you did a better job than pretty much anyone else in the House leadership in answering some of these Democratic attacks on what is a worthy and positive and conservative bill that passed the House of Representatives on Thursday. What do you say to people who say, well, all you're doing is throwing 24 million people out of their insurance in order to give a tax cut to the rich?
Yeah, I'd say a number of things, and your assessment is correct that there's a lot of things inaccurate being said, but let's start with that point. First, on the CBO report that says 24 million people will lose health care, I think you don't need to look any further than the first year to see just what their false assumptions are. In year one, we make a 2-year transition away from Obamacare and into a new free market plan where people get to actually choose their own health care. And what CBO says is, in the first year, 10 million people lose health care, and of course, nobody loses their health care because you have the transition. So what their assumption is because people now have the freedom to choose not to be in Obamacare, they call that lost coverage. If you're in Obamacare today because the law forces you to, and then under our bill, you no longer have to be in Obamacare, and you choose to get out of Obamacare, they call that lost coverage. Well, Michael, you and I would call that freedom. Freedom to actually go find something much better for your family than Obamacare. That's not lost coverage.
Okay, so what do you do to make sure that there is something much better available so that some of these people who want out of Obamacare will actually not just be uninsured, they'll actually get something better?
Right. First thing we do is we zero out the individual and employer mandate penalties so you can get out of and be freed from Obamacare. But then we go and actually reduce a lot of these mandates that are jacking up the cost of health care. We also give families a tax credit so that they can go into a free market and buy whatever they want for their family, including something that they think is better than what some unelected bureaucrat in Washington tells them they have to buy under Obamacare. So you have not only freedom to go out and buy whatever you want, not just what the government tells you have to have, but we actually give you a tax credit so you can get the same buying power as a company gets. Because if you get health care through your company, they can actually get tax benefits to give you that health care. But if you go buy it on your own, you have to buy it all with after-tax dollars. So it makes it harder for families to shop around.
What about the charge from Democrats that what your bill does, Congressman Scalise, is it puts an age tax on people over 50 because all of a sudden they're going to be compelled to pay more for their insurance?
Well, under Obamacare today, older people are paying more than they were before because what happens is because of all the mandates, right now, young people, the younger, healthier people, are not buying health care, even though they're mandated, because the cost is too high. And what that does is it jacks up the cost for everybody else, especially older Americans. What we do in our bill with the tax credit, we actually put an increased focus on 50 to 64-year-olds. So we know that health care is too expensive today, but when you go to a free market, we wanted to make sure that people that were, and I don't even call them old people because I'm in that group, it's a 51-year-old, but people from 50 to 64 years old will actually get an even larger tax credit than somebody who's 30 years old because ultimately health care is more expensive, but you actually reduce that by increasing the tax credit that families will be able to get.
And what about the pre-existing conditions? Because that's what you hear about most from Democrats, that basically if somebody is sick, if you're born with a birth defect, this means if the Republican bill passes that you're going to throw people out onto the sidewalk and watch them die and cackle.
Yeah, and this is probably the biggest lie that's being told because the left thinks that it scares people the most, and that's all they do is scare people because they can't debate the substance. And let me say this very definitively, Michael. No matter what plan you have today, under our bill with the continuous coverage provision, if you have a pre-existing condition, you cannot be denied coverage and you cannot be charged more than anybody else. And no governor in any state can waive that protection, period.
Okay, so you cannot be charged more than anybody else except if you let your insurance lapse, right?
Right. So, and again, in our bill, you have the ability to buy whatever insurance you want or to not buy insurance at all. That's your choice. I would recommend that people have health insurance no matter what age they are. But if somebody chooses not to and they have a pre-existing condition, one of the things we do is in our bill, if they want to come back into the healthcare marketplace, and this is going to be a narrow scope of people that this would apply to, but we put an extra $8 billion in our bill. This was the Fred Upton, Billy Long amendment, so that people that get out of the healthcare marketplace can actually get in at competitive rates to help them actually go back and get insurance again. So we encourage people to have insurance. We don't mandate it. We don't tell them what they have to buy. But if if they have a pre-existing condition, they can never be charged more than somebody else. We just felt that's that's the right thing to do. It's not right that somebody can be charged more if they have a pre-existing condition, and they're protected in our bill. But if they choose not to get care at all, then ultimately we actually create a separate fund to help people get back into the insurance marketplace if they want to.
In just the minute we have left, is there one area where you think the Senate is likely to actually improve this bill?
I think they're going to get a little bit more focused on the 50 to 64-year-old tax credit and increase that a little bit more for people in the 56 to 64-year-old age range, and I think that would be a good improvement. As long as they leave in place the reforms we make that focus on lowering premiums for families, protecting people with pre-existing conditions, and giving families the ability and the freedom to choose their plan and their doctor again. Those were the things that Obamacare destroyed. Let's put those back in place. And, oh, by the way, the Medicaid reform we made, you talk about a conservative idea that's been around for 50 years that's revolutionary, to actually give states the flexibility to do a much better job of serving low-income families in Medicaid than the current rigid one-size-fits-all Washington plan is today.
That's the House Majority Whip, Republican Steve Scalise of Louisiana. We'll be right back with more on the presidency, on health care reform, and your calls.